Hello, hi. My name is Adam Brophy. I'm a commissioning editor with Folens Publishers. I was the publisher on our book, Peak Performance. And I'd just like to say thank you to you all for coming in tonight. I know it's a difficult sell to tune into something like this after a long day of teaching. So we're greatly appreciative of you being here tonight. I won't talk for very long. I'm here primarily to introduce Eoin Joy, who's going to give a talk on really about Leaving Cert PE and the new exam, the new course in general. The reason that we're doing this now is because our book was published last year and it's been very well received, and the course itself has attracted a lot of attention. A lot of schools, because of the COVID situation last year, deferred taking on the course. The September just gone and deferred it till next year, and as a result, people like Eoin, the rest of our author team have reported that there's been a lot of questions sent their direction on how best to prepare to address the course. So we thought it would be a good idea to do a night like this where you can listen to Eoin, listen to his experience over the last few years teaching the course, throw any questions you have his way. He'll talk for 15-20 minutes on the course. After that, we'd like to open up proceedings to a Q&A. So if anything pops into your head in the next 20 minutes, or if you have any questions already that you would like him to address, stick them into the question box on your screen. We'll take a note of them and I'll pass them on to Eoin once he's finished his presentation. So anything related to Leaving Cert PE, feel free to throw it his way. So for now, I'll hand over to him. We will have the Q&A at the end of this, and I'll also give you a little bit of information on how you might want to contact your Folens rep to discuss getting any more information on the Peak Performance Programme afterwards. So for now, Eoin, over to you.
That's great, Adam. Thank you for the introduction. So guys, just to begin with, as Adam said, the motivation for this was to try and give either current teachers teaching Leaving Cert PE and teachers who plan to teach it in the future just a couple of tips or share my experiences of teaching the subject with you guys. So any questions, again, that you feel that you'd like answered, pop them into the questions tab and I'll do my best to respond to them at the end. I'm very much aware that it's Champions League semi-final night, so I'm going to try and be quick, try and be brief, but at the same time hope that this is productive for all the attendees online, which I'm kind of blown away by how many people are here, to be honest. So firstly, what I would like to say is I am a Leaving Cert PE Phase 1 teacher. I've started teaching LCPE in September 2018. So just like many of you guys know, I would have undergone some excellent training from the PDST and would have formed a community of practice with other teachers where we shared resources, shared ideas, and really dipped our toes in Leaving Cert PE in what was a very exciting time to be a PE teacher, but at the same time there were many challenges and continues to be challenges in teaching the subject. So what I would like to do is to share some of the session outcomes with you guys before we start. So primarily I would really like to present a quick overview of Leaving Cert PE. As I said, I'm aware that there's some teachers here with us who haven't taught the subject before but might only be planning to teach it in the future, so this could be beneficial to you guys. I also wish to share my 2-year macro plan for teaching the Leaving Cert PE program that we currently use in my school. So this very much is a live document that kind of gets changed with the more experience that I have and other teachers have teaching the subject. I'm going to share my top 5 tips with you related to best practice for teaching Leaving Cert PE, and also to address any questions that you might have related to it. So just before I begin, I very much would like to point out that this has been my most enjoyable period of teaching since I started a decade ago. It was something that, since I started, I'd heard it was on the pipeline and potentially Leaving Cert PE could be coming in as an exam subject. So when the opportunity came to teach in 2018, I very much jumped at the opportunity and have loved every minute of it since, even though there has been challenges, as I've said. It's been brilliant. So to begin with, the program is broken into 2 strands. So the first strand is called Towards Optimum Performance. This very much is all around performance development. within physical activity. So it's broken into 4 topic areas, and all of these are compulsory topics that students must do each year. So the first topic is around skill and technique. Second topic is a huge topic, a topic that I find very interesting. So big that we've decided to split it into 4 different sections within our book that we felt would make it easier for students to understand and to learn. So primarily, we're looking at the health and performance related components of fitness. We then move on to look at the principles of training. We move on then to look at psychology and nutrition. So a really big topic, but a really interesting topic all the same. Topic 3 relates to structures, strategies, roles, and conventions. Again, there's quite a lot of detail and quite a lot of learning outcomes in this topic, which again, we felt we could split into a couple of subtopics within our book. And finally, topic 4 in Strand 1 is planning for optimum performance, which is very much related to the physical activity project, which I'll speak about briefly in a moment. The second strand of the course is called Contemporary Issues in Physical Education. This very much examines the factors like that influence participation and performance in physical activity and sport. There are 2 compulsory topics in Strand 2. So topic 5 is taught every year, and topic 6 is taught every year. So topic 5 is all about the promotion of physical activity. The PEAI, if anyone's a member of the Physical Education Association of Ireland, recently published a very good document on this that I found very useful in my teaching also. And then topic 6 is ethics and fair play, which for me probably I have found to be the most enjoyable to teach in terms of student engagement, very much related to performance enhancing drugs and anti-doping rule violations and supplements in sports. So some really nice material there between those 2 topics, 5 and 6. Between topics 7, 8, 9, and 10, each year students are prescribed with 2 topics of the 4. So my current cohort of 6 years are looking currently at topics 8 and 9 for the Leaving Cert coming up. So we get a notification of which 2 topics to teach. So overall, guys, you have 8 topics to teach. You have 4 from Strand 1 and 4 from Strand 2. To quickly look at the assessment in Leaving Cert Physical Education, again, I'm aware that some people are very familiar with these assessments, and other people might have heard of some of the terms but mightn't be overly familiar with what they are. So briefly, there is a physical activity project that is to be completed. This is generally completed just prior to Christmas in 6th year. I probably will take a few questions on that later. I don't want to go into too much detail on it now, but what I will say is I've brought through 2 cohorts of students now through the project. It's really, really nice work. It's can be difficult in your first go doing it, understanding the intricacies of the project and supporting and helping students through the project. But when the projects have been finalized and completed, there's a great sense of satisfaction from the teacher and especially from the students. So again, I would say that quite a lot of work involved initially, but great reward coming from the physical activity project. Here, again, I just highlight that it can be marked at both higher and ordinary level, depending on what standard the students decides to sit the subject at. We also have a performance assessment worth 30%. In the next slide, I'll go in and mention about how you might decide to pick your performance assessment areas and some of the options that you have and some of the criteria around that. This is a 30% assessment. Unfortunately, my group, my 6 years last year, had begun this performance assessment and had begun shooting footage for their official assessments to send through to the department. And again, it was somewhat similar with my group this year, who were probably less advanced in it. But they weren't completed and they don't have to be completed this year. So while I have some experience in the performance assessment, I've never brought it through to completion with a group. So again, I'll have some knowledge in the area, but mightn't have as much knowledge in that as I would have in the physical activity project. So just be aware of that when you're posing your questions. Finally, there's a written examination worth 50%, which we can speak about in a moment also. I think as a teacher, it's very important, what I have found is to become aware and very familiar with the key documentation surrounding Leaving Cert PE, and there's quite a few. The document here on the left-hand side, which is the curriculum specification, to be honest, was my Bible over the first year of teaching Leaving Cert PE. At the time, we had very few resources. We were making up the resources on the spot, maybe borrowing some resources from A-levels and GCSE in England and trying to apply them to our own context. So to be honest, through that time and then through the development of the book, I have become very familiar with the curriculum specification, and it's really stood me in good stead. And I'd advise you guys to do the same, to become very familiar with it. There are also two other key documents that were developed by the NCCA. One of them is around guidelines for the performance assessment, and one of them is around guidelines for the physical activity project. So again, when you're doing those particular components, or when you're looking at those assessment areas, these guidelines are crucial. Added to that, over the past 2 years, some key documents have been released by the SEC, which are very helpful in my planning and in my teaching. So the first one here on the left-hand side was released in 2020, and it was more guidelines around the performance assessment. So I would have looked at this document aligned with the NCCA document to really kind of understand the performance assessment. The middle document here is a physical activity project booklet. So with the physical activity project, what students must submit is they must submit a Microsoft Word booklet, which includes text, and it can include up to 16 supporting images. It also includes, so you also submit video files, but this here is the Microsoft Word booklet, and within that it's very structured and it's very clear what the students can and must engage with when they're doing their physical activity projects. The final document here that I've shown is the sample paper provided by the SEC, which shows a bit of the structure of the exam. And there, again, if you go to the SEC website, I think that the most recent exam paper is up there as well in higher and ordinary. Okay, so moving on, just going to share a couple of tips with you here, which I think are very important in terms of selecting the physical activity areas. On page 12 of the specification, a lot of people will be very familiar with these physical activity bubbles, is the kind of terminology that we are using for them. So again, if any of you have received PDST training or will receive PDST training in the future, one of the first things you will look at is these bubbles and look at the physical activity areas. So it is envisaged that Leaving Cert PE is taught primarily through 3 physical activities. And it is one of these 3 physical activities that a student will pick for their performance assessment, worth 30% of their overall grades. So my advice is from the start, it's key that you understand these physical activity areas, and it's most important that you pick the correct 3 that will match the needs of your students and also the environment within which you work. So if I was to take these 6 very quickly, I would say in my school context that athletics is absolutely an option. We have the grounds, we have the space, we have the equipment, so we can very much look at that with the students. In terms of artistic and aesthetic, a couple of things would mitigate against that in our situation. We don't have a strong culture within the town or the community. We don't have gymnastics or dance clubs. I would say the teacher skill set in this situation isn't very good. But if the students really felt passionate about it, of course, I would entertain their arguments and we would come to an agreement together. The same can be kind of said for adventure activities, in terms of I don't think that we would have the natural terrain or we don't have the environments to run it to a high standard for Leaving Cert PE. Games, absolutely we do. We could run a number of different games. This is always a bubble that we look at. In terms of aquatics, again, probably don't have the infrastructure or the facilities to run that very well. And with personal exercise and fitness, we absolutely do. So in my context, we're left with 3 potential physical activity areas. And then I have the discussion with the students about the 3 areas and come up with a conclusion on what the actual activity within each one is. So what it has turned out for my groups over the last 2 years, from athletics, we have picked sprints. From games, while there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of debate on both occasions, Gaelic football came through just about. And in terms of personal exercise and fitness, we went for weight training and interval training. And just as an aside, a really nice part of that was I was able to go to my school management and show them that weight training was on the specification, that we would be doing this. And fortunately then our principal was able to give us the investment in our gymnasium to upgrade the equipment to a really high standard, which I felt was needed to run the spec. So I mentioned that I'm going to share my 2-year macro plan with you. Okay, so obviously I could spend the next half an hour speaking about exactly what you see in the next 2 slides, but we don't have the time for that. So again, maybe if these might be shared with you afterwards, you can go through it yourself. But basically, my plan a lot of the time is in 5th year. Just sorry to say that we run our program on 3 single classes and 1 double class. So primarily the way I see that is my 3 single classes are going to be my theoretical classes, and my double class is generally my practical class. Again, very important if you are planning for this to work with whoever creates the timetable in your school to ensure that when you have that double class that you're not clashing or not sharing the hall with another group. Very important, I believe, to have that for yourself to meet the needs of your students. I have this broken into, as you can see on the left-hand side, term 1, term 2, and term 3. So I class term 1 as far as Christmas, term 2, Christmas to Easter, and then term 3, Easter to summer. Very much within my plan, I want to cover an awful lot of theory in 5th year. Now, I know other teachers might approach this a bit differently, but I found that this has worked very well in my context. So up as far as Christmas, I very much try and cover topics 1 and topic 2 with a little bit of diet and nutrition left over for just after Christmas. Okay, so I feel that while some teachers probably get through that material a little bit quicker, I feel that students are getting embedded into Leaving Cert PE and Leaving Cert PE practices, and I think I just take my time with those 2. Then, as you see, I push on then to topic 6. People might wonder why I jump from Strand 1 to Strand 2 there before having completed everything else in Strand 1. And the reason for that is there's a lovely link between nutrition and supplements, and then supplements and performance enhancing drugs. So I think it's a natural fit to teach nutrition followed by parts of topic 6. And then you can see I jump back to topic 3, get a little bit of topic 4 done. Finish off my ethics, topic 6, and then do a lot of topic 5 as well there just before the summer holidays. Jumping into 6th year then, in the initial block there just before or when we return, I try and get the 2 prescribed topics done in the 5 or 6 week period, and then I very much jump into the physical activity project. As you can see here, I have 10 weeks marked up for it. A lot of times that might run to 11 or 12 weeks. In my initial planning, I would have tried to teach other theoretical concepts during that time, but very much found that during project time, it's very hard to do anything else, only project work. However, topic 4 very much lends itself into the theory side of the project work, so I actually do teach topic 4 aligned when I'm doing the project work. Returning after Christmas, I do a lot of revision, because at this stage I have the course covered, so a lot of revision of our theoretical concepts for the pre-exam, which we have actually quite early, which is early in February. Then after that, we push on with our performance assessment work, which will be 6 or 7 weeks of dedicated work for that. And then finally, back to some revision work and exam prep and technique. Right, I want to share now some top tips with you. I'm aware here, I'm looking at the clock, and I'm probably going a little bit over time at the moment, but I'm going to speed it up now. And again, just to remind you, if you have any questions, you can pop them into the questions tab there. Again, this might be an interesting slide for you to examine when you have a bit more time, but it's me sharing some ideas of how I use my practical classes to develop performance assessment skills by practically applying the theoretical concepts. So quite a mouthful there, or a lot to take in. Basically, with my double class of practical, I see it that I have 2 objectives within that class. So the first objective that I see is to maybe embed some of the theoretical principles that we have studied in class into practice. And the second thing that I see is very important in that time is that I'm prepping my students with skills that they will use later on for their physical activity project, and especially for their performance assessment. So it's twofold, and I think that if you spend a bit of time, if you understand this and spend a bit of time planning those practical classes, you can get really good bang for your buck with those. So an example of this, which I've shown here, might be if you're teaching biomechanics, maybe in September of 5th year of your program, you might decide then that, in my particular context, weight training is obviously one of the physical activity areas. So when I get to my practical class, I'm going to teach biomechanics through weight training. But aligned to that, then I'm going to be able to introduce my students to some camera work skills, to some recording skills, and it's going to be them developing their skill set in weight training, especially the students who think that they might be doing it as their performance assessment, and as well as that, then all students are working on their camera work skills and their video editing skills, which is physical activity project skill set development. So within that practical class, I have covered material that could turn up on the exam. I have some skills developed for the students in their performance assessment and physical activity project. And I feel structuring my program like this, I'm making good use of my time. This didn't happen in the first year of my teaching of the program, but it's only through time and experience that I've come to understand that this works quite well. Okay, moving on. A second tip that I have that actually was shared with me with a co-author here, Fergal Lyons, was to get students to write performance goals as they progress through the topics 1 to 4. So a quick little overview of what I mean by this. So topics 1 to 4 that we saw were in Strand 1, that's all related to your physical activity project. For your physical activity project, in section B, students are already after testing themselves in a load of areas of their performance, and now they need to write performance goals. So instead of me like bringing this to their attention for the first time when we're doing our physical activity project in 6th year, while I'm teaching each of the topics in Strand 1, I'm showing them what performance goals are and what a performance goal might be with that particular topic. So for example, the bullet points here on the screen show the areas that students can write performance goals on in their physical activity projects. So one of them here is health-related fitness. So a student might have conducted, for example, a 1 rep max, might have compared their data to norms and might have figured out that they were in the 30th percentile for people their age, or they weren't that strong. So even though I'm teaching this maybe in November of 5th year, I will get them to keep a bank of performance goals written out related to health-related fitness. There's actually a space in our peak performance student workbook where I get students to do this, and sometimes I get them to do it on their virtual learning environment also, which I might speak about in a moment. Okay, big one here, guys. I would suggest that you put a bit of time, bit of thought, a bit of planning into the development of your department's digital technology infrastructure. Again, this list of bullet points I have here is probably, well, I think at this stage it's impressive. We have our school, very fortunate, our school have invested into our digital technology, and I'm in a really happy space with this right now. So what we have is we have 25 iPads and a sync box. Those 25 iPads are partitioned for us. So what that means is currently we have 3 5th-year groups and we have 2 Leaving Cert groups. So we have 5 groups overall. But a student in each of those classes might be assigned iPad number 2. When they pick up iPad number 2, they will log in with their own unique username, and all of their material will be there, and none of the other students' material will be there. So that's really, really handy, and it's a very good way for us to manage our system. We use Apple School Manager and Jam for School. So again, if you are buying things like iPads, again, your supplier will probably speak to you about those. But again, they're very good for just managing things like apps and the iPads themselves. A good tip here, to be honest, I don't really know how it happened or how it ended up this way. I asked a few questions and it got done for us, but we have our own unique Wi-Fi network in the school. So what that means is only the PE department devices and maybe teacher laptops, as well as those iPads, are hooked up to that Wi-Fi network. So what that gives us is a really secure network with really high speed, really good quality. Other teachers in the school are aware of it, come looking for passwords, which we lie to them and tell them we don't know what the passwords are. We have a short throw projector with an Apple TV in the hall in the gym. Again, probably took us, we have one in the gymnasium at the moment, and we're currently putting one into the hall. The Apple TV is brilliant because what that allows us to do is to project wirelessly to the projector and onto the wall, which is excellent. Okay, we use a virtual learning environment, so we use a Google Suite, where again we share all our notes, PowerPoints with the students, and they can submit tasks through the Google Suite. A lot of the time I will pop up our peak performance textbook online to supplement their learning with the students having the books, and then some useful apps that I use will be Google Drive, Huddle Technique, and Adobe Spark. Point number 4 here, guys, it's essential to pick the 3 most appropriate physical activities for your context. So a short time ago, I spoke to you about the options that you have and how critical it is to get these options right. So quick little story and a learning moment that I had is when I originally took on the course, I was very much, okay, I'm going to be so fair to the students. I'm going to make sure that the students get the sports that they want so that they're all comfortable and they have a physical activity that they can use. So when it came to the selection of games, which I wasn't surprised by, it seemed very much split between basketball, soccer, rugby, and Gaelic football. It was actually split between 4, and it was something ridiculous, like all close to 25% when it came to a vote. And each of the students were making big arguments about why it should be the sport that they selected or the game that they selected. So in my, I was naive at the time, so I decided to pick a sport, and I picked badminton. So I said, look, you know what, I'm not going to upset anyone. I'm going to pick a sport that you're all going to be at a similar level at, and we can work on it together. So I came up with lovely elaborate schemes for badminton and looking at the skills of badminton as outlined in the curriculum specification, and was very happy with how things were going until I asked a 6th-year student at the time who was a badminton player to come down and give us a hand, in which case I realized what a badminton player looked like and who was exceptionally good at this skill set, and it all looked so natural and easy for him comparing to what my students the level that they were currently at. So I was thinking, no matter what kind of a badminton coach I was or who I brought in, I wasn't going to be able to bring any of these students up to a standard if they were looking for high grades like a H1 in the performance assessment. So I kind of figured out there and then that, okay, this sport was a ridiculous choice. It shouldn't have been in place. And we voted again, or I'm not sure how it went, but Gaelic football was selected. And a lot of the students were happy that maybe soccer might have been their first choice, but Gaelic football was a good second when it compared to badminton. One key thing here, guys, is just to really try your hardest to ensure that every student sitting in front of you is comfortable in at least one of the 3 physical activity areas that you select, because ultimately that's going to be worth 30% of their exam. So it can be a hard challenge, it can be a hard balancing act, but it's really important to get that right. Okay, finally here, guys, we've developed a sports science program in transition year in our school. We brought it in to help us give students some skills and competencies that they might require going forward for Leaving Cert PE. It's certainly not finalized or polished or anything like that just yet, but some of the things that we try and develop in the PEAI program are things like camera work and video analysis skills, resistance training skill competency, fitness. Yeah, so I think, guys, that's the brief overview that I wanted to give you. As I said, I'm very comfortable now, or happy to take whatever questions that you may have, and I might just pass you over to Adam.
Hiya, Eoin, thanks very much. Well done. It's very comprehensive, a lot of detail there. Okay, would you mind just clicking through to the next slide there, please?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's great.
You got that, Adam?
Yeah, that's come up nicely, thank you. For anybody on the call, if you do want to get a hold of the PE Performance Programme, which includes the textbook and the student activity, the student learning log, if you get onto folens.ie, a pop-up box will come up and you can automatically find your local rep. They'll be quite happy to either take a call from you or a group call if there's a number of PE teachers within the school to run through the program and to sort you out with any requirements you might have that we can help you with. So folens.ie rather than the Hive is the address to go to for anything like that. Okay, so on the subject of the Q&A, a few questions have come through. I'm just trying to group them here. There's a good bit of concern on, or not concern, but interest in the gear that you need. One person looking for a little bit more detail on how you use iPads in PE. Also somebody else asking what's the minimum requirement that you might need? Can you actually do the program without iPads?
Are you speaking there, Adam? Sorry, I think you might have dropped out.
Is my sound gonna, did you miss it? I was asking you about the tech required to teach this. There's a couple of questions asking about, can I do the program without iPads? What IT resources do you need? Could you actually teach the course without iPads at all?
Okay. Right, so in answering that question, just a little bit of a disclaimer. I remember when we signed up as a phase 1 school, there were requirements around digital technology and what we had to get and what we had to put into our program in order to run it. I'm unsure if the current cohort going through have been given these requirements or if they're in fact needed. But from my experience, what I would say is, look, we've been fortunate to have the digital technology to support us all the way through. I suppose the big area where digital technology is needed or required would be in the areas of the performance assessment and the physical activity project. So for the physical activity project, students need to obviously record footage and package footage together. So there is absolutely requirements for some form of digital technology. As I said, in my context, iPads were used to do that. We use apps such as Adobe Spark to run this for us. I know that some students are comfortable doing this on their iPhones and on other phones that they may have. So what I would say is that if your school's acceptable usage policy allows some students to use equipment such as their own phones in the classroom under teacher supervision, well then the program, I would say, can be ran, because I know in our school students have used them. So I suppose there, and again, similar enough for your performance assessment, students need to record footage and package footage, so it's the same requirements for that. I also supplement a lot of my teaching using different apps and using different technology that is afforded to us by the equipment that we have. But absolutely, again, that can be done without the camera work, or sorry, without these apps and different things that I use. So for example, one app that I have found that was really good or really helpful in my initial 2 years of teaching weights and resistance training was the app NSCA Global, which gave students like video demonstrations of how to do different lifts. And again, that was an excellent resource that I was using. But could I have taught the program without it? I absolutely could have. Another area where we use our digital technology is the virtual learning environment. So I set a lot of assignments and tasks for my students through Google Classroom. I would communicate with my students through Google Classroom. But again, they can access this on their phones, and it doesn't have to be on an iPad. So yeah, that's my answer for that one, Adam.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Have you found it difficult to agree upon the physical activity areas with the students? I know that you mentioned choosing areas of expertise that best suited both you as a teacher and your students, but has it been difficult to agree those activity areas with the students?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think my job is made a little bit easier by the fact that realistically in our context, only 3 of the 6 bubbles are a realistic option. So initially that's narrowed down for us, and I think the students very much agree with that. So there's no hassle when it comes to that stage of it. Within the particular physical activity bubbles, then the selection of the physical activities themselves, in terms of athletics, it hasn't been too much of an issue. A lot of our students would be involved in athletics clubs and would have had like sprint backgrounds, so people were always kind of comfortable enough to pick that, and there's been no issues with that. In terms of the personal exercise bubble, again, students are very much aware that we have a really nice gymnasium in our school. There's kind of a strong culture of, as I was saying, resistance training, skill competency kind of developed through 4th year. And again, I find that students are just really interested in it and want to develop in that. So again, the weight training students are very interested in, and what it also does, if I was looking to try and push it a little bit, I'd explain to them that, well, look, this can actually very much help you with your physical activity project also in terms of strength development or power development. So I think in our context, again, that's a very easy sell with the interval training. The most difficult one, obviously, that I mentioned already, is picking the game. Really strong culture of games in the area and locality where we're from. So there seems to always be a bit of debate, but ultimately I feel that, like, while someone might be very much want to pick rugby over soccer, these students kind of play quite a few sports, so while they might have a preference for one, they can still be very comfortable in the other, and then I'm comfortable with that. So what I'm just trying to ensure that when all three are selected, that every student in front of me in the class is quite comfortable in one. If there was a student who didn't have a chance to be successful in either of the three, then I have an issue, but I haven't come across that up to this date.
Okay, very good. A couple of questions related to equipment, particularly for weights training. Do you need a lot of equipment if you decide to go for weights? Someone else is introducing PE in September, and the principal has asked for a list of equipment that they'll need. So I suppose some specific advice on weights equipment required.
Okay, I think you dropped out slightly again there, Adam, but I think I got the gist of the question. So I suppose ultimately, again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of this is dictated by what's in the curriculum specification. So straight away, I'm going to go to my spec. It's on page 44 when it comes to weight training, and I'm informed that I need to do things like upper body pushing, upper body pulling, so things like pressing, extending, rows, curls, squats, and lunges. So again, some of those exercises can be done with body weight, but again, if it's going to be done authentically, and if we want students to be successful in performance assessments, I would say that in order to do this well, we need a range of free weights, so you need a range of dumbbells. Absolutely, when it comes to upper body pressing, you could get away with doing things like dumbbell bench press, dumbbell floor press, but again, if I want my students to be really achieving highly with it, I'd expect that they would be able to do things like good bench pressing, good shoulder pressing. So not only would I advise schools to try and get your free weights in terms of your good range of dumbbells, but I'd also go for barbells, Olympic weight plates. And then obviously with all that, there is some little bit of risk. So you do want to protect yourself as a teacher. So ensure that you do have good squat racks with good safety bars. And as I said previously, building the skill competencies of the students in terms of the resistance training in earlier years in the school. I find a lot of them come to me now in 5th and 6th year, they're quite capable and quite able, and the safety isn't as much of a concern as it could be. So yeah, look, we did invest a bit of money into that, but I'm confident that we did because the equipment we have is now good, it's safe, and students can complete the skills they're required to from the specification.
Okay, excellent. You might have covered this a little while ago, Eoin. What video analysis software would you recommend, and have you any idea how much it costs?
Okay, so when we started out in our program, so with the video analysis software, I presume what's meant by that question is breaking down skills in terms of maybe biomechanics or movement quality. What I have used since the start of the program has been an app called Huddle Technique. I was able to push that out to all my iPads. Some of the students have it on their phones. I've heard murmurings recently that that potentially could be going behind a paywall, or might have been put behind a paywall. Now, it's still not there on my iPad, so currently I can still use that for free. I know that an awful lot of other teachers would have used the app Coach's Eye. Again, I think there's quite a lot of similar features in that, but I haven't used it, so I'm not overly familiar with that. If Huddle Technique does go behind the paywall, I might have to look towards Coach's Eye if that one is free, because again, we haven't heard a lot of expense with the PE department. So if I can use one tool that is cost effective over another tool, I'm going to use that. What I would say is an awful lot of people get really hooked up or concerned with your video analysis software. It is present in the program and it's there when you're analyzing skill and technique and analyzing biomechanics. It can absolutely be used as part of your performance or your physical activity project as well. But what's more important, in my view, is the capacity of students to be able to take videos well and then add videos together. So to develop their physical activity project and to develop their performance assessment, they're going to have to storyboard and place one video beside another video beside another video. They're going to need to, in their case of their physical activity project, be able to annotate videos, put on voiceovers, put on text on screen, and for that I use Adobe Spark. So I found it to be really user-friendly. Students find it user-friendly, and importantly, in the context of the physical activity project and the performance assessment, it shoots out videos in MP4 file format. So for teachers from phase 1 and potentially phase 2 now at the moment, they would have heard about that. And let me tell you that times are busy when it comes to the submission of projects, and the last thing that you want is a student handing you up a file format in the wrong file format and you trying to change file formats. So yeah, like one student last year for me was completing their work on iMovie and had promised that they'd have the files converted and didn't. So it came out of the .mov file format, which isn't accepted. So we do a bit of tweaking and a bit of changing of file formats there. So Adobe Spark, I think, is the answer to all my prayers when it comes to that.
Okay, so there's distinct file formats that you have to submit your videos in. You can't just use whatever the software that you have to hand saves it.
Yeah, it's an MP4 file format, which is used or created from a lot of apps. But as I said, Adobe Spark. During phase 1 as well, there was also a criteria for the images that were submitted for the physical activity project. But last year that loosened up. So now last year I was able to put in like PNG files or JPEG files or any file format, whereas the previous year it was issued to us that it had to be JPEG, and again that was tough work when I had 40 students trying to get their 16 files into a JPEG when they had them in all different types of file formats was a nightmare to begin with. But again, I shouldn't probably even be mentioning it because most people on the call will never have to address that issue. Okay.
Suffer through that. Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, on a similar topic, staying with video stuff, one teacher asked, for the PAP, can students only use footage from the 10-week period in 6th year term 1, or can we use footage that we're recording now?
Again, a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm not 100% sure on it, but the way I've done it and the way I believe it is to be done is a window opens up for the PAP, and it's during that window, which is those 10 or 12 weeks or whatever it is between maybe late September, October of 6th year, all the way through to Christmas. That's your PAP window. So I think that's the only footage that you can use. I'm aware of other teachers who might do like mini PAPs in 5th year for maybe summer assessments where the students are developing their skills and putting projects together. But no, I think that material has to be captured at that time. And I suppose a second, once it's a concern, but a second factor with that is that footage is supposed to be carried out on site. And if it can't be carried out on the site, the teacher is supposed to accompany the students for the shooting of the footage. So for example, last year I had one student who was doing show jumping for her physical activity project, and on 2 occasions I went off site and was there when she was having her footage recorded of her doing her show jumping.
Okay, so there's a bit of scope there.
Bit of scope, but also again, I wouldn't be advising, like I had 40 students, 40 projects that time. I wouldn't have been happy if more than one was off site, because obviously there's only so much time that teachers have. And even now, I'd be encouraging them to do on-site PAPs.
Of course, yeah. Otherwise, I mean, if you had everybody taking off around the country, you orienteering, horse riding, whatever, every weekend, lead to interesting exam submissions. Okay. Let me see. I'm just trying to pick a question that follows on from that. Is the PAP and performance assessment similar in terms of the amount of recording or video editing, and how do they differ?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's an interesting question. I think from experience so far, and as I said, I haven't brought a performance assessment through to completion where it has been submitted to the department, but I would say that the physical activity project requires a lot more in terms of video editing, in terms of video recording, in terms of digital skills, because there is a lot of activity, there's a lot going on with the physical activity project. You must have 16 images you're attaching into a booklet, which requires a certain skill set. And then with your 4-minute video, which sounds quite small, there's a huge amount of work that goes into that, whether that is, as people asked earlier on, whether it's doing your analysis using video analysis software, whether it's embedding that in with another video, whether it's annotating videos, capturing videos, putting side-by-side footages of you against an elite performer or you against a previous performance that you have done. There's so much scope to develop nice projects, and I would say that while it's not the be-all and end-all to have really fancy ways of producing it, that there is a high level required in terms of putting it together. So again, I think that by the time that they get to do their performance assessments, those skills have been really cemented from the physical activity project. And at that stage, then they're very much just concerned with getting their best footage of them in the activities. So an awful lot of that is around the planning of the activities, the planning of their drills, the planning of how they would present their best performance. And at that stage, even though that's a longer video, it's not as onerous to put together because they've had the experience from doing it before and because it's put together in a simpler format.
Okay.
That's all I got, Adam.
Right, nicely covered. Okay. Eoin, what would you say is a good balance in terms of timetabling for a room versus for the gym?
Yeah, I think as far as I'm aware, most timetables either run off like the 40-minute slot or the 1-hour slot. In my context, it's 3, or we have 5 40-minute classes. It works perfectly for me. I really like having the 3 single theory and the 1 double practical. So that I think works really well in the context of the 40-minute classes. For people who have the hour classes, again, I'm probably not as well versed to answer that question, but you'd probably be looking at, well, it probably can't be done this way, but if it was there 2 hours of a theory in 5th year and 1 hour of practical, and if you could flip that on its head in 6th year and go for your 2 hours of practical and 1 hour of theory, for me, that's probably what I'd be looking for if I was teaching to the 1-hour model, which I'm not, but I think that would work well, because as you've seen when I presented my 2-year macro plan to you, I do an awful lot of theory work in 5th year, and when it comes to 6th year, then an awful lot of work is practical, because there's an awful lot of work involved in the physical activity project and performance assessment. Yeah, so that's probably how I tackle it.
Okay. The question here, what strand or topic has been difficult for you to teach, and for what reason?
That's a nice question. I think topic 5 presented a few challenges for me. I think that there is quite a lot of content in it. There's a lot of different policies that teachers have got to investigate and uncover and bring to their students. So when there is a number of them, I think students can find it hard themselves to pluck relevant information from these policies. So for example, from Get Ireland Active. So like my students, even me having taught them, would be very aware of what Get Ireland Active is, but if you were to probe a little bit deeper for understanding, I think they find it hard to retain some of that information, especially then when they're looking at maybe national and governing body development plans. So a lot of the material throughout the course, I think, is quite snappy and quite user friendly, and students find it interesting. I think students find top 5 a little bit more difficult, but again, that might be very much as a result of my teaching of it. So I'm very aware that I want to come up with new strategies for dealing with some of the learning outcomes in topic 5. So for example, at the moment, I know that topic 1, 2, 3, 4, I can teach those things in my sleep because probably I'm very interested in them myself, and because I've come up with kind of novel ways of teaching them, but my practice needs to get there further with topic 5. Additionally to that, then, for example, I've never taught topic 10 before, so I've been teaching it this year now for the first time. So again, that might have certain challenges that I'm not aware of yet.
Okay, so it's obviously the stuff that you're most comfortable with, you fly through, whereas it's just, I presume for every teacher there are topics that are new to them or in areas that they haven't covered before, so they're going to be finding those particularly difficult.
The service, I had an interesting class recently looking at the new player development pathway by the GAA. Again, it's a document that will say we have to explore, but again, just to pick out the key parts to it. And I suppose once the teacher maybe does the initial work of breaking it down and making it more user friendly for the students, I think they got a lot from looking at that and understanding that, and they were interested in it. So it's not all doom and gloom for topic 5, but yeah, I can definitely develop my practice with it.
Okay. What do you mainly use to teach during theory classes? Straight from the book or slideshows? I don't say straight from the book. You never deviate from the book, do you?
Look, to be honest, I found it quite frustrating. Initially, having lack of resources. I previously taught in further education, and I would have taught courses like sports nutrition, sports psychology, or personal exercise and fitness, gym instruction, personal training. So I did have a lot of notes, but they weren't very relevant, or sorry, they were related to some of the learning outcomes, but they weren't hitting it bang on. So I've been pulling GCSE slides, A-level slides, and then as our community of practice started to develop, we kind of took different areas and worked upon them. But again, it was still a bit messy and still a bit all over the place, and you're kind of going into class kind of second guessing yourself, are you covering the learning outcome properly and all that, okay? Obviously then I had the opportunity to write the book, which very much gave me the opportunity, along with the other authors, Nicola, Sarah Jane and Fergal, to really delve into those learning outcomes and produce a resource that I felt really hit on those learning outcomes. And look, I was very happy that it was, you know, the first book on the market, and we're proud of that. So nowadays I use 2 things. Definitely use the textbook. From the textbook, I get students then to take notes, so they have their notes copied, they have their textbook. And another teacher in our school was very passionate that he teaches through PowerPoint, and he finds that students learn best through PowerPoint. So I was actually fortunate that he spent last summer translating our book into PowerPoint slides. So what I have now is like the book, I have our PowerPoint slides, and I have the students' notes. And then oftentimes I'll supplement them with extra bits and pieces of materials that I would pop up into their Google Drive. So for example, I just spoke about the player pathway developed by the GAA. When they went into their Google Drive, they went into their topic 5, and then I'll have our PowerPoint from the book, and then I'll have supplementary materials, and that will be in there. So yeah, I think it's just giving all students an opportunity maybe to suit their best style of learning. So people like reading from a textbook, that's fine. If you like reading your own notes, that's fine. If you like your PowerPoint, so I think there's kind of options there for everyone. So yeah, the longer I'm spending at this, you know, I think the more, actually I'll put it like this. Originally we had no resources, then we had hundreds of resources, not all of which I thought were very applicable, so it was nearly worse than the start. Whereas now we're very much kind of refining the program to exactly what I need, which is helpful and which is good. But considering I'm kind of spending nearly every hour of the day at this since September 2018, I think it's about time that I became comfortable with what I have. So I'm happy where I'm at now.
Okay, great. Interesting question here. You are doing GAA as one of your 3 activities from games. Can a student then do their PAP in basketball?
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean yeah. I mean yeah to the question, but the answer is no. Those 6 physical activity bubbles that we looked at, if you pick to do your performance assessment from one of those bubbles, you cannot pick another activity within that bubble for your physical activity project. So it's actually a good point, and it's very important that students know that from the outset, because further selections obviously. So what I generally do is even though you do your physical activity project first and then you do your performance assessment, I very much flip that in terms of getting students to decide, because the student, first of all, in my opinion, needs to know what to do for the performance assessment, because that's worth 30%, and because that is actually assessing their skill set and how good they're at something, they need to have that spot on, they need to have that nailed on. With the other assessment, which is your physical activity project, you're not getting graded on how good you are at it, you're getting graded on your engagement with the project. So again, even me, I could do dance or gymnastics and do a really, really good job with that project, even though I'd be terrible at those physical activities. But my engagement with it, my exploration of the activities, my doing things like a needs analysis, writing effective performance goals, designing effective programming, engaging with those programs, that can all be done. So again, to answer your question is no, can't be picked from the same bubble.
Okay. Did you have any experience of students that had no games experience outside of school?
Like, as I said, no, I think at this stage we've had over 100 students in Leaving Cert PE between the year groups, and like it's definitely true that not all of those play games or would have had experience playing games. So when it comes to that, a lot of them then would jump over towards their potentially sprinting. Some of them would have been part of sprinting clubs, but again, not everybody. And then others then would be quite interested in their personal exercise and fitness and would be comfortable, and then would develop their skill set in terms of their weightlifting and interval training. So absolutely not everyone is interested in games. I think just to give people kind of a rough idea of the breakdown last year, so as I said, I had 2 classes, I think I had 21 and 19, so I had 40 students overall. And from that number, I think I had 7 sprinters, which was quite a high number. And I know that particular cohort had a lot of sprinters in it. So 7 sprinters, which left 33, and that was nearly 50-50 in terms of Gaelic football and personal exercise and fitness. I don't know, was it like 17-16 or 18-15 or something like that, but there was a good split between them. So no, I definitely didn't have 40 people doing Gaelic football.
Okay. Right, Eoin, we're bang on 8 o'clock now, so I'm conscious that our time is up. There are still a couple of questions outstanding, but what we're going to do is we can distribute a recording of this webinar to all attendees in the coming days. We'll do that. And if possible, would it be okay if I share the rest of the questions with you afterwards, and any responses we can also include with that, either within the email or as a Word doc? Would that be all right?
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, good.
Just
so it's not
I was going to have a quick word there, Adam, just before I finish up. So look, I just like to thank people for coming online myself tonight, taking time out of what is probably a very busy term in work. So I hope that some of the details that I provided might provide you with a bit of clarity on the development of your programs. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you do want to discuss things in a little bit more detail. You'll probably find my number from someone. I won't hand it out over here, but yeah, it's great. I think the subject has added massively to the culture of physical education in our school and our town, and it's been brilliant. And as I said, for me personally, in terms of my career progression development, I'm extremely happy to be teaching it, and so grateful that it has come in. So I hope that you guys kind of embrace it as well, and that you have positive experiences with it like I have had.
Great. Thanks a million, Eoin. I really appreciate the effort you put into tonight. And just there was one last question there. One teacher asked, they're taking on Leaving Cert PE from next year, and they have 3 books to choose from. Why should they choose Peak Performance? Well, all I can say on that point is that, like, from working on the project with Eoin, Nicola, Fergal, and Sarah Jane, is I can't imagine any of the other books have an author team as dedicated, knowledgeable, and committed to this subject. They were an absolute dream to deal with, and the effort that went into ensuring that this book aligns with the specification was huge, especially around assessment. So well, around content and assessment, both sides. So I mean, I'm very proud of this program, and I can't imagine either of the other books would stand up to it under.
I might add in one detail there as well. I'm not sure some people know. So like originally, actually, I began writing a book. I was approached to write a book, and I was kind of nicely into the project when I got the phone call from the author team, wondering would I become involved. And at that stage, I was thinking, okay, well, I have the hope of competing against the author team that are there. So I had nothing signed. I know there was no conflict, that there was nothing broken. So, but I quickly jumped ship and added my expertise to the group that were there, and was very happy to do it. And then also, I must say, added to that, obviously, Folens were absolutely unbelievable to us, excellent to us. No expense was spared, and just so proud and happy with the quality of the production. So again, for people who are using it, hope you're enjoying it, and for those who aren't using it, I would definitely say get your rep, get a copy of it, and you can see for yourself what the product is about.
Lovely. Brilliant. Well, thanks, Eoin, and thanks everyone for getting on this evening. And we'll share the webinar with you in the next couple of days, and maybe we'll catch you again on one of these at some point in the future. Right. Thanks. Goodbye.